We all know that 19th century Britain was a strange place. From the big wigs and makeup to the human hair jewelry to the sorrow felt by the nation for having gone 2 rounds with America and being KO'd each time, there were many eccentric facets of British society during the 1800s. Despite this common occurrence of oddities, some individuals still rose to the top and were the strangest among an already strange time. Today, we take a look at a man who drank like a fish, gambled on everything from blackjack to child hill rolling competitions, and generally just had more money than sense. Today, we're talking about John Mytton and his mindset of neck or nothing that led to him being known as Mad Jack. John Mytton was born in 1796 to a wealthy family of land-owning, upper-class Brits in the west of England. His family had a storied history, stretching back some 500 years, but little did Jack's parents know that this baby boy would be, perhaps, the most notable chapter in that history. When Jack was 2, his father died, leading Jack to inherit the land his family owned, worth around a modern-day $10 million, and which generated an annual income of over a modern $1.5 million from renting out the land and from its agricultural assets. Jack went to Westminster School in London, but was expelled after only 1 year for fighting one of his teachers, and then was expelled from his next school after only 3 terms, proving that he too could be a great big ass. After this point, he was taught by a series of different tutors, with them often changing out due to the practical jokes Jack would play on them. However, while you or I may have propped a bucket of water over a door or used a 19th century whoopee cushion, the wealthy take pranks to a more high-concept place and do artistic, well-thought-out things like leaving a horse in one of his tutor's bedrooms. His academic career seems to have ended here, considering that even though he was admitted to Trinity College, the school's records show he never actually showed up. This is despite Mad Jack's claim that he was as prepared as a Victorian frat boy, in that he had brought 2,000 bottles of port to, quote, sustain himself during his studies. Either way, he found school boring and left, doing what people in their early 20s, who are also members of the upper middle class, do best, using their family's money to go on a grand tour of Europe. He was briefly in the army, but left after only about a year. Despite the fact that his time spent in the army apparently just consisted of him gambling and drinking while occupying France after the defeat of Napoleon, he felt he needed more time to focus on the things that mattered, like drinking and gambling in England, and so he resigned from his post. He returned to his property in preparation for receiving his full inheritance when he turned 21, and oh boy, did he get right to work on spending that money. Like so many other deranged and wealthy people, Mad Jack decided he wanted to go into politics and sought out a seat in Parliament. He managed to secure that seat, but it wasn't because of his charm and good looks, or because of his political prowess. He employed a cunning new political strategy that the world had never seen before. His process worked as follows. He found voters, and then paid them £10 to vote for him. You would think he'd be as happy as a clam to have won, but in fact, he found the whole thing boring and hard to follow, in part due to his impending deafness, and he left after only 30 minutes. He tried to rejoin Parliament over 10 years later, and when he lost, he vowed to contest the election, but couldn't because by the end of the voting, he had already gone into hiding to avoid the people he owed money to. Money was something near and dear to Mytton's heart, and as much as he may have loved having it, he loved spending it even more, specifically through bets and gambling. If you could name an activity, Mad Jack was willing to bet on it. The best example of this could be his contest that he would hold for local children, paying out winners of whoever could roll down a large hill the fastest. He also spent large sums on his horse Euphrates, who did win rather often, and who Mad Jack loved to bet on. He was also clearly a man who was down for anything, as he once raced his horse through a hotel, up their grand staircase, onto the balcony, and then jumped his horse over the diners in the restaurant below, leaping out of the window, all simply on a bet that he couldn't. The man was also an extremely avid hunter, who loved to import animals for hunting, particularly foxes. He would go hunting in any weather and was known to sometimes be so caught up in the thrill of the hunt that he would strip down naked and hunt in the nude, even in the winter, walking through snowdrifts in his birthday suit. He would also continue to hunt despite sustaining serious injuries like broken ribs. Even though he tended to hunt only carrying his gun, he had plenty of hunting supplies in his home, including thousands of articles of clothing and over 2,000 dogs. While he clearly wasn't an animal lover, based on, all the hunting, he did seem to care about his pets, feeding his favorite dogs champagne and steak, and letting his favorite horse have free range about the house. Oh, and if that all wasn't crazy enough, he also owned a bear. He once rode the bear into a party in full hunting gear, and when he pricked the bear with his spurs, the bear promptly, and understandably, turned around and bit through his leg. Accidents like these were common, but it's said that Mad Jack didn't simply not care about accidents, but rather that he, quote, positively liked them. That being said, his accidents were inspired by an inquisitive mind and a lust for adventure, and totally weren't just truly dumb things that he did. For example, he once was driving his carriage and pondered, much like a philosopher would, whether a horse could jump over a toll gate and pull the carriage with him. Luckily, he didn't lose too much sleep pondering this question, as he quickly crashed into the toll booth. On a separate occasion, he was riding his carriage with a passenger, and asked the man, quote, "Have you ever been upset in a carriage before?" The man said he had not, but that would quickly change, as Mad Jack responded, quote, "What? What a damn slow fellow you must have been all your life." He then promptly drove the carriage up a steep hill at full speed, tipping him and his passenger out of the carriage. It was well known that Mytton wasn't just an avid gambler, but a lavish spender too, with visitors to his estates saying they'd sometimes find banknotes lying randomly about his property. Like so many high rollers, John fell into deep debt only 15 years after inheriting his fortune. This was not without warning, however, as his financial advisor had told him that if he could just cut his spending back to the equivalent of about $800,000 US for 6 years, he would not have to give up his assets and properties. Mytton responded by telling the man he'd rather die. In his later years, he sold the property and fled to France to avoid the people he owed. There, he met an attractive 20-year-old woman named Susan, and, having had his first wife die and his second run away, paid her £500 a year to be his companion until his death. While in France, we have one final certified Mad Jack moment. That is, when he tried to cure his hiccups by setting his clothes on fire. He was getting undressed and prepared for bed while experiencing the hiccups and was simply over it. He said, quote, "Damn this hiccup, I'll frighten it away." At which point, he grabbed a lit candle and held it to the tail end of his cotton shirt that, of course, he was still wearing, causing it to go up in flames. A guest and Mytton's servant promptly helped put the fire out, and afterwards Mad Jack exclaimed, quote, "The hiccup is gone, by God!" In 1833, he left France to return to England, and was promptly arrested and put in a debtor's prison, where he died of delirium caused by alcohol withdrawals. The moral of today's story is, if you want to be remembered, live your life to the fullest and grandest extent. Eventually, all of us will simply be a legacy, and while the men who held Mad Jack's title before and after him have either brief Wikipedia entries or no entry at all, Mad Jack lives on through his antics and misdeeds. Sure, he may not have been a noble guy, or a smart guy, or perhaps even a good guy, but no one can deny that he truly was a memorable guy. Go out into the world and make a splash, even if it's just the water you'd use to put out your flaming shirt.